all geneticists are eugenicists because it starts off in your first course to do with eugenics, superior and inferior types. Therefore, at the start of their training at university, they become true believers in eugenics to begin with. We've been told that the double helix in the genes and so on wasn't discovered until Watson came along around the 70s or so, and that they'd always suspected that there were things called genes. This was standard in all medical training for many, many, many years, but they hadn't found them. They just suspected they were there, we're told. But yet, if you go into the writings of the greatest mathematician that the Royal Society could produce, called Rutherford, he's the guy they sent off abroad to do the equations for the pyramids and so on for the Royal Society. In his own memoirs, he said that in the early 20s, he was employed on scientific research as a mathematician to work on genes. Why would you need a mathematician who's working on genes for something you haven't discovered yet? You can't see them unless they could see them. And I believe that's how far ahead they truly were back then. They did know the genes were there. They were working on them heavily. Because, as I say, the agenda since at least Darwin's time onwards was to create a superior type of human. They toyed with the idea of creating even a superior type of worker to serve the superior class. Someone who could be very, very healthy, bright enough to accomplish all the tasks, but not too bright to overthrow the dominant minority. That's what the utopia, or the utopic idea, is basically based upon. Some of them are so arrogant, like Julian Huxley, who was the first CEO of UNESCO, who said that UNESCO's function, by the way, the United Nations Organization for Education worldwide, was to create a standardized system of education across the world so that all children could be manipulated into the same thought patterns, belief patterns, and mentality, basically. A standardization process, a Plato's cave that would all grow up in, never knowing anything outside that cave. He was quite blatant about that. It was for social engineering purposes, not for educational purposes as such. Now, eugenics goes back, as I say, into the most ancient times. All kings and queens were mated up for their supposedly inherited traits as leaders and even as gods by the priesthoods, who kept records of the traits, the physical and mental personality traits of offspring of these unions. The one thing that was lacking was a moneyed class who also used the same techniques. We find this coming out with the Rothschilds family. So you had monarchies running the world, running an empire such as the British Empire. All you needed now was the moneyed system to go along with it. We find the Rothschilds worked on the same principles as monarchies. They intermarried each other to keep the same intellects, abilities, and so on going. With the Rothschilds, we find they only marry their nieces, their immediate nieces, down through the generations. We find Benjamin Franklin, very interesting man long before this, again, high Freemason. This is in his own records at the Franklin Institute. He joined the English Lodge. He joined other lodges. He became eventually the Grand Master of the Nine Sisters Lodge in France. He initiated Voltairean as a member and others. But he was also a member of the Hellfire Club in England. Benjamin Franklin talks about the carriers. He called them dollies. These are women who had selective genes. They were the products themselves of selective special breeding. And the Hellfire Club, like many Masonic, high Masonic institutions of that time, had what were loosely called, and wrongly in a sense, brothels attached to them. But it was also a cover because the special carriers, or dollies, and dollies, the term that Franklin himself coined, is still in use today, A dolly is a carrier, like something you carry luggage on or whatever. Basically, he said that those who are worthy to go on and breed with these particular women, who are of noble birth, most of them, would have the pleasure of having the offspring, knowing they had the offspring, and the offspring was guaranteed a life of high exposure in science and perhaps leadership in the world. Madame Bouvier was the one he was talking about initially at the Hellfire Club in High Wycombe, London. And Madame Bouvier's descendants still live. There's two of them in France today, and the other one was Jackie Kennedy. If you look at how politics is run, and you go into the writings of people like Lenin, for instance, Lenin said there are 1,000 directions and systems in which people could go and live under, but the public mustn't know that. He said it's important that the system that's created for them is accepted by the people, so that they think that's the only system that could possibly work. And it's true. We're contained in a system of left and rights, supposedly the have-nots against the haves, or those who own the means of production against those who don't, the workers. And that's traditional Labour versus Tory, or Conservative versus Democrat. That's how the system is run. It keeps the public contained within a system of thinking that it must be one or the other, or a middle road in between, which they push. It never occurs to the general public that society has lived in the past under many different types of systems, and as Lenin said, it's important that the public don't know that the system they're born into was designed for them, and that it could be any different. They must think it's the only natural one that could have evolved in their lifetime. Therefore, you're contained within a restriction of parties. You vote in one party when you're sick of the last one, not because you want the new one in. It's because you're sick of the last one and what they've done to you. And once they've been corrupted and gone off in different tangents in ways where they never explained during the entire elections, had nothing to do with their election promises, you vote them out and get the next party in. And so we go on forever with this left-right paradigm. Always think it's like a tennis match, really, with the public in the middle. We're the ball, and we just seem to go back and forth between left and right, left and right, left and right. Meanwhile, we're being shepherded all along in one direction, because politics is a tool of the elites to manage the public. That's all democracy, in fact, really is, a tool of the elite to contain the public, manage them, and guide them along a predetermined path that's outside of any kind of democracy. But if you take Bush, what he was sent in to do was to wait, and I believe this truly, he was to wait for 9/11 happening in 2001. 2001 happened, every country automatically went on board with the same agenda at the same time, which shows pre-planning. Bureaucracies in different governments do not work that fast. It takes years to get that kind of cooperation, that kind of synchronicity working together, and synchronization. Bush's job was to bring in a totalitarian system under the guise of protecting the public, where you lose your rights, and set up the machinery, the agencies to do it, the military forces, the paramilitary forces now that the police have become, to set up the institutions for enforcement of laws. Obama comes in, takes over the institutions that are now set up, and his job is to guide you through the economic depression and use those forces against the public at the required time. That's how it works. There's a continuity as far as I'm concerned. It's not a separate regime whatsoever. The same boys who put Bush in, the bankers and all the rest of it, put Obama in, and Obama's proved his loyalty to them by literally allowing them to rape the public of all their funds, and then rewarding them by public funding and tax money to save the same bankers. He's one of their own boys, but he now has the machinery in place that Bush set up to quell the coming riots that they say are going to come, and to manage the public into a brand new system of what they call not government but governance, international governance. If you listen to Obama's speeches before he was elected, and I analysed what he actually said. He said very little. He was giving emotive speeches with no substance. He never said what he wanted to do or how he was going to do anything. It was almost like a lead-up to a movie that hadn't been made yet. Emotional talk of hope, but not saying how the hope would be transformed into realities. He used the term that's been used in academia for the last few decades in the Ivy League schools and universities of the century of change. So his slogan became, and they used slogans written for him, change is good. Any idiot should ask the simple question, wait a minute, what change are you talking about? How can you be for change if you don't know what the change is going to be? It could be for your detriment. But they got the people parroting, like George Orwell said with the sheep, you know, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Change is good, and the people, his followers, start to repeat it, change is good. What kind of change are we talking about? The loss of sovereignty, the blending into an international institution, a world government system, a system where not only is America bankrupt and the most indebted nation on the planet for loaning money out to other countries and policing the world, being the policeman of the world, now Obama wants to lead the charge on sustainability, carbon taxes, by making America the example for the rest of the world to follow. He's asking everybody to sacrifice everything they have. That's what he means by change is good. He didn't dream up this plan. He is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Again, that comes from the Milner Group, the Cecil Rhodes Society, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, that planned world governments using Britain based as a model for the British Empire, now become the American Empire in a sense. And the changes here he's talking about is a new world of servitude, where you will serve the world state. And you'll also have to pay off all your debts along the way, which is impossible as far as I'm concerned. You cannot ever pay the kind of debt America has incurred since World War II. It's impossible to pay back. Therefore, the changes he's talking about really is a New Deal. When you hear a New Deal mentioned by any president, and we got that from FDR, we got it from Bush, last Bush it was in, a New Deal. We're getting it from this administration. That's a legal admission from the leader of your country of a new system. A New Deal is literally a new system. The first system was the Constitution. You got an updated system with FDR as government became incredibly big and centralized. And now you've got a New Deal under the guise that change is good. Who planned the change? It wasn't the people who planned the change. Who will benefit will not be the people. It's the world of sustainability, Mr. Rockefeller, the population reduction plan. Those who will go into the future will be those who are necessary for the future's maintenance, and those who are simply obsolete, the useless eaters, will have to perish and die off. It's as simple as that. This generation today, the ones who are alive today, we are the generation that's going through the biggest changes in history, according to even Rockefeller himself, since the Industrial Revolution. It's the